housekeeping items. And people potentially start trickling in over the next few minutes, and then we'll hand it over to our speaker for this evening. We'll mention that this is being recorded. So if you need to change your display name inside of Zoom, go ahead and do that now. Or if you wish to not be on the call, now's your chance to escape. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for attending this evening to the Devops Columbia meetup. We've been running virtual meetups here for a while due to COVID, and worked out well. Always looking for new speakers. So if you have any interest in presenting a topic at any time, feel free to reach out. You can drop your information to the organizers in the meetup link, which I suspect you have, considering you're here. Or if you have any interest to this evening, be sure to use the Zoom chat, and we can get in touch with you as well. So a couple of things to cover. First, I'll put it out to anybody that's in attendance this evening. If you have any cool events or meetups that you would like to broadcast and see if you can get additional attendance at your event or meetup, go ahead and unmute now and tell us about it.
Hey, I just wanted to say we're starting a meetup for Amazon Web Services and MVP. So take a look for that. We're going to have the first meeting hopefully in September.
Awesome. Yeah, I had heard about that one. It looks like an exciting new meetup. If you have a link to it, go ahead and drop it in the Zoom chat so people can get to it. Or additionally, we do have a DevOps Columbia channel, DevOps-Columbia, in the Baltimore Tech Slack workspace. I will drop a link to that workspace sign up in the Zoom chat, and so you can feel free to drop it in that channel and see if you can get some attendance there, or just if you want to chat with anybody from the meetup this evening, it's a good place to look for them.
Cool, thanks.
Awesome. Well, next thing to cover is anybody who might be looking for work or anyone who is hiring. I'll go ahead and start off. So I actually run a company, EITR Technologies, and we are always hiring. So feel free to hit our webpage, eitr.tech, TECH/careers, and look at some of the exciting opportunities that we have there. We do both commercial and federal government work. So we always have positions on both sides of the house there, whether it be DevOps engineers, cloud system administrators, cyber defense analysts, always looking for developers, and then also automation subject matter experts for automation frameworks such as like Terraform or Salt. So I'll drop some links also in the chat, and definitely check those out. All the commercial roles are 100% remote, and some of the federal government roles have some amount of telework, which is pretty exciting for the space. Does anybody else have anything? Excellent. All right. So I guess this is our last call for anybody that wants to talk about anything real briefly before we get started. Anything interesting or anything else that you'd like to bring up? All right. Well, I don't see anybody making moves to unmute. So let's go ahead and get started. As I said, my name is Nick Hughes. I'm the stand-in MC for this evening. I will be introducing Eric Mosher, who will introduce himself as well. As we go through the presentation, feel free to drop questions in the chat, but they will not be addressed until the end of the discussion. So if you feel like you're going to forget what you wanted to say, definitely make a note of it in the chat there and we can address it at the end. But otherwise, let's go ahead and take it away, Eric.
Hi, thanks, Nick. I'm Eric Mosher. I'm here from the National Security Agency, and so here to talk about some of the things we're doing at NSA and in the DevOps space. And I think, you know, the kind of the driver for this talk is that we typically think of the public sector as slow and not agile and things like that. So I'm here to at least give one example of how, at least in some cases, the public sector can be agile and can engage in some of these DevOps practices. So a little bit about me. So I'm the team lead of a team within NSA called the Devops Pipeline. That's part of a group called DevX, Developer Experience. And so the goal of DevX is really to improve the developer experience. And I'm the lead for the DevOps pipeline, but that has a couple things under it, one of which is sort of the GitLab instance within NSA. And so you can sort of think of us as a GitLab.com within NSA. We kind of run that service and make it available to developers there. I've been in NSA about 9 years, had a variety of different job roles. And so like I've done everything from front end data visualization stuff. And then I kind of got interested in server side issues of size and scale. And so that kind of led me to cloud automation technologies, CI/CD, DevOps, that kind of stuff, all those great buzzwords that are perfect for this meetup. So kind of the agenda for tonight, some background. I want to give some background that'll kind of set up some of the things in this discussion. Talk about some of the challenges we have as public sector and NSA. Some of the things we do to use GitLab, to deploy GitLab. And so we'll kind of talk about what that means in a minute. And then the things we're doing to champion DevOps, as well as some future plans we have specific to the GitLab instance and things there. So quick background on NSA. NSA has two missions, foreign signals intelligence and cybersecurity. The signals intelligence mission is all about providing foreign signals intelligence to policymakers in the military. So it's really about that decision-making idea. Cybersecurity is about protecting networks and sensitive information. Obviously, that's a very big topic nowadays. And but because of these two missions, right, if you think about what these are two very technical missions. So there's a ton of developers, system administrators, network admins, and other technical folks at NSA that have to run the capabilities that power these missions. And so as a result of these two missions, we're a pretty technical agency, and we're the largest enterprise in the intelligence community. And since we're a technical agency, we do some open source. You can see some of that at code.nsa.gov. And those are actually projects that we've released as open source. So some quick background for some of what I'm going to talk about today. I gave a talk right around a year ago now at a GitLab commit scaling DevOps at the NSA. And so just kind of a really quick synopsis of that, just so that we can kind of get into some of the other stuff I'm going to talk about today. This talk kind of told the story of GitLab at NSA. And so in that talk, we talked about all sorts of things, one of which is that we upgraded from version 7 to 11, GitLab version 7 to 11 in a day. Obviously, there was months of prep work involved for that, but that was kind of the story of that talk, of this talk. And so because of that, we moved from a source code install on hardware to Omnibus and a cloud install. And so if you're not familiar with the way GitLab works, GitLab Omnibus is just a kind of a massive RPM that has a bunch of stuff in it that has all the pieces you need to run GitLab, all the pieces and services that run a GitLab instance. And so this was a move off of that source code install, as well as that move from hardware to cloud. And the cloud is AWS based. So just, bear that in mind, although it doesn't have a ton of relevance for what I'm going to talk about today. And the way that we did this was very much infrastructure as code. We went in from the beginning knowing that we wanted to be very fast, be very agile, everything needed to be repeatable, because we know that GitLab commercially releases once a month. And so we wanted to be keeping up with that commercial version. And all this got started because of this DevX effort at NSA. And so because of that, right, these cloud deployments and so forth, it takes people, right? It takes effort. And so DevX is really the thing that put the buy-in to allow this to happen and build a team for it and so forth. So some challenges we have. The first is air-gapped deployment. So that's just kind of a fancy way of saying there's no internet connection. So in the case of GitLab, right, a lot of the things within GitLab that use containers might reach out to registry.gitlab.com. That doesn't work for us in air-gapped. So that's a challenge we have to overcome in what we're doing. The second is we have more than one instance, and this is particularly something that got going with COVID, because while we have kind of a main instance, we also have had the need to grow the number of instances to support things like telework. And so because of that, that's another challenge we needed to address. And so this really gets into the automation idea, because without automation, running more than one instance of a HA highly available service, that gets pretty hard. So so that's where that automation comes in. And then also on the automation front, our ATO process is always a challenge to work through. So that's our security and accreditation process. And this is another thing where automation helps tremendously, right? We want to really be sure that all of these security controls and things that we're addressing are built in and baked in and repeatable, so that we can do that stuff at scale. The last is culture and history. And because of that lack of support for the GitLab instance prior to DevX, we still deal with folks that may have things like a Jenkins running, or some folks might even have their own GitLab instance that we don't know about. And because of that, it's just a continual process of helping folks move to the corporate service that we're running, as well as addressing any concerns that they may have. And NSA was founded in 1952, so it has a long history. It has a long a long history of projects and organizations and so forth. And so I think that's one of the areas where there's a little bit of a challenge sometimes, because a project may have been around long before DevX got started. DevX has only been around for about 2.5, 3 years now. And so a project may have been existing much longer. And so that's where we need to kind of work through some of those issues with projects that that have been around a while. So the next thing, how we use GitLab to deploy GitLab. So the important part of this is kind of our architecture. The important part of this is actually at the bottom. The stuff at the top is the looks very similar to the reference architectures that GitLab puts out on its documentation. But down at the bottom, right, that's what actually does all of this stuff. And so really all that is two things. Number one, that is our GitLab, what we call GitLab ops, and a deploy runner, which is a shell runner that's connected to GitLab. And so that allows us to use the GitLab CI/CD features to deploy GitLab. And so the way we do that is by the runner, the shell runner, talking to the AWS APIs, and that kind of builds that infrastructure for us. You know, all those RDS instances, auto scaling groups, things like that. And the second thing is we use the stages, the GitLab CI/CD stages, for ordering the jobs. And so this is important, right? If you're thinking about an RDS, right? An RDS, the database needs to be existing before you deploy the auto scale group. So we use those stages to kind of order the jobs and ensure that those dependencies are met prior to the later stages executing. We use CI/CD variables a lot, and especially the environments for CI/CD variables that was introduced fairly recently. I want to say it was in the last year, but particularly those environments are helpful because we have a staging instance as well, and so we're doing all sorts of testing on there and trying things out, and so we want to have those variables for dev versus prod. And our jobs typically are the CI/CD jobs are typically centered around a Terraform apply or an Ansible command. So this is from the visualization screen in the CI/CD pipeline editor within GitLab. And so here you can see sort of a partial pipeline. If I were to show the entire pipeline that builds our architecture, it would require like 5-6 slides. There's a lot there. But this just kind of gives you an idea of some of the things we do, right? So there's the gray bars at the top. You can see those are the stages I talked about, and then those green boxes are the jobs within that. And so that kind of shows you what that looks like. And then we use these stages. We use these stages pretty independently, so it's very rare. I mentioned the 7 to 11 upgrade. That was really the only time, aside from some practice that went in before it, that was really the only time that we actually executed the entire pipeline, because that's building the entire infrastructure from the ground up. And so that's not something we do very often. We certainly have the capability to do it, but that's kind of how we do that, and ensure that things are getting updated as we need. So this is a quick snapshot of those variables I talked about. And we use these a lot. We have a bunch of these, and the environments over there on the left, that's really, I think, one of the cool things we like about these is that we have that dev versus prod idea. So quick example of what a pipeline might look like. So this is an excerpt from the GitLab CI/CD job for an autoscale group. There's some other stuff involved, obviously, that I've cut out just for brevity, but you know, essentially it really revolves around that Terraform apply idea that I mentioned, right? So there's some setup at the top, right? There's some variables getting set, getting passed into the Terraform variables. We're seeding into a directory, and initialize, validate, apply. And so that lets us kind of encapsulate that logic into Terraform, and ensure that we are automating the automation, so to speak, right, with GitLab. We're using GitLab to execute those Terraform and Ansible commands for us in a repeatable way. The next thing is, I mentioned kind of our idea of wanting to stay up to date with the commercial version. And so we do that by actually having an upgrade pipeline. And so what this does for us is it encapsulates the logic for upgrading a minor version. So for example, 13.1 to 13.2, right? And so with the upgrade pipeline, that's what we use to stay up to date with those commercial versions as we're pulling them in. And we do that by leveraging AMIs, the Amazon Machine Images. And that's really helpful to us to be able to roll in new AMIs into the autoscale group and ensure that those autoscale groups are getting updated. The stages, as I talked about before, that gives us that predictable order. And so I'm going to show a example what that looks like as well. But these pipelines can be Bash or they can be Terraform and Ansible. And we actually will sometimes start some of these with Bash because we know, okay, we need to run this command. And we will do that with GitLab CI, and then we can make that job a bit more mature as we get further down the line of testing it out and trying things with it. And this really gives us that idea of push button deploys, because really the only things we need to change are those variables that I showed a slide or two ago. And then we can essentially use the interface within GitLab to literally push a button to create the infrastructure or update it. So this is actually what our upgrade pipeline looks like. So there's several things in here, but essentially starting from left to right, we're upgrading Gitly. That is the backend data storage for the Git data that is involved in GitLab. We upgrade pages. So we have GitLab pages, and that's a separate service from the autoscale group. We upgrade the front end, so that's the autoscale group. We have an API autoscale group as well, so that gets upgraded next. And then we have that cleanup stage at the last part there. And so the cleanup, we actually leave that manual. So that's where you see in this picture, you'll see the prod cleanup has that little play button. And so we do that just because we want to make sure that this is still fairly new for us. So we want to make sure that everything in those previous 4 stages went right. And then once we're sure of that, we click that button to do the cleanup on the variables and other orphan resources that may be in the cloud deployment. So next, some of the things that we're doing to champion DevOps within the public sector. We I like to say we embody the behaviors that we want to see. But you could also call this lead by example. From the very start of DevX, we really built in things like postmortems into our teams from the start, and that's something we're continuing to do. And so I mentioned the 7 to 11 upgrade. That was the subject of my GitLab commit talk. And so what we did there is we did a very, very big postmortem, because there was a lot of work that went into that. And it was a very stressful day, as well as the time afterwards, kind of getting used to how things were running. And so we've really done a lot to promote these practices, and we're trying to share that as much as we can. And so that's kind of that next idea, right? We do get out to conferences and meetups and things like this, and so that's something we're trying to do as well, is share what we've learned, both internally and externally, in things like this, as well as other opportunities. And the next thing I think is pretty important, and that's kind of that supporting the tools and the users will come. And so the idea here, right, is I think we've shown, and we've really proved that by supporting this tool, GitLab, and by supporting by ensuring that we're doing what we need to support the developers using it, the usage is going to go up, because people want to use something that works well. And so that's one of the things we're doing there, and really kind of talking to people about that as well. And I think this kind of gives us some leadership buy-in, as well as buy-in from the devs that are using it. And so that gives us a lot of momentum, and we're really trying to use that momentum and promote DevOps, both inside and outside of NSA. So next thing, couple future plans, and then we can get to questions. So we are evangelizing CI/CD, and so I use that term because we're sort of working with the developer evangelists at GitLab to take some of the ideas that they have there and promote them internally. And that's because we're using GitLab, so we want to take as much lessons learned from the experts there, right? The Gitly clustering, that again, Gitly, you may not be familiar with all the pieces of GitLab, right? But Gitly is that backend Git storage. And so one of the things that GitLab added recently in the Omnibus package was the ability to cluster that. And so we're going to be implementing that fairly soon. We're actually really close to that now. And the last thing we want to add, we're always looking to add more testing. And I think over the past, 2-ish years that we've been doing this, we've seen the need for that, and we've gotten better at some of the manual testing that we do. But we really want to add some more automation and build some of that into the CI/CD pipelines that we're doing over the, implementing a lot of those ideas that we have learned over time doing this. All right, and with that, I will stop sharing, and I can answer any questions you have about the talk.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. That was a great presentation, and sounds like you're doing really good work, and especially removing obstacles to developers, definitely going to accelerate their journeys for sure. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute at this time and ask them of Eric. Additionally, if you don't feel like talking or you can't, feel free to drop it in the chat, and I can proxy those for you.
Are you mainly deploying into like an AWS environment, or you have other environments that you're deploying into?
Yeah, we're deploying in the AWS. It's all AWS based.
Are you running like any Kubernetes type stuff?
We are not. We had that conversation early with GitLab, the company, and essentially we felt that we didn't have a good Kubernetes option to ride on, and we felt that the AWS auto scaling and so forth was sufficient for what we needed.
What's been the biggest barrier to adoption for you guys, getting people to move over to your platform?
Good question. I think some of that culture and history that I mentioned may be it, and that's sort of the idea that some folks may have Jenkins already running, things like that, and so there's sort of an attitude sometimes that, well, our stuff works, right, and we don't. And so there's a little bit of inertia there that we have to overcome to kind of get people to realize that, hey, there are benefits to not running your own Jenkins and things like that. So,
What kind of things have you used to kind of get people to look at doing GitLab versus something like Bitbucket?
Funny thing there. So we actually have both. We have an Atlassian suite as well, and we kind of went into that with DevX. We went into this thinking that both existed, and we wanted to enable support for both of them. And I think we've definitely seen that there are this will come as a shock to you, right? But developers have a lot of preferences and opinions. So I think some level of option there was kind of what we're going for right now. So. Did that answer your question? But
Yeah, no, that was great. I was just curious because I've worked in the space before, and Bitbucket seems to rule the roost in some.
yeah, I mean, I think that's accurate. It's sort of there's I'm going to harp on culture and history, right? But I think that's some folks have been using Atlassian and some folks have been using GitLab, and if you're being successful, you're implementing CI/CD, I don't care. So.
Do you have a lot of customers who are using using your GitLab and then moving into like a Kubernetes style environment? Like, are they able to use some of the GitLab tools to interface with Kubernetes clusters?
There are some. I don't know. Yeah, that'd be hard to quantify. There are some, but I think that the challenges of an air gap deployment, both on the Kubernetes and GitLab side, I think is one of the things we've seen that can be not necessarily a blocker, but a thing you need to work through. So that's one thing we've had conversations with GitLab about, but it's also that I think right now the Kubernetes landscape is not where it should be internally. So yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
You've talked about the culture a couple times. Are you finding it's easier to recruit younger employees with a more modern software development story, or are you guys struggling the same way everyone is?
I might have to refer you to public affairs for that one, just because I don't know. You know, I'm not involved in recruiting, so yeah. Anybody else? Or
You've talked about your use of pipelines in building out and maintaining GitLab. What about your customers? Do you see them using GitLab runners and moving to more pipelines and more DevOps oriented development?
Yes, for sure. I think that's hard for me to quantify in this space, but yes, we've definitely seen that, and we've seen the numbers to show that. So,
What kind of roadblocks do you still see for like development teams and integration teams to like coming on board and using your services more?
I think we see kind of the idea that the developer landscape is not you know, there's always something missing, and I think whether it's some of the things that we're doing within GitLab, right? GitLab provides a lot of services within one tool, and so sometimes we need to work through you know, someone might have a need, we need to work through implementing that within GitLab, or maybe there's some other tool out there that we need to support things like repositories and so forth. And so I think it's to try to summarize a little bit, I think it's a little bit of there's a lot of things developers need, and it's a challenge to really kind of get everything that folks might need.
All right. Well, we had a lot of great questions for Eric. Eric, thank you again for coming and speaking with everybody this evening. If there's any particular way that people wanted to get in touch with you, whether it be through the Baltimore Tech Slack for DevOps Columbia channel or any other means, feel free to drop them now, and then we'll probably cut the recording right after that.
Okay. Yeah, the Baltimore Tech Slack is probably the best way. That's fine.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody coming out this evening. And again, if you ever have any desire to speak about something cool and interesting that you've done, or maybe even something that you've wanted to do, definitely reach out, and the organizers of the DevOps Columbia meetup will get you all set up, speaking like Eric did tonight. So everybody have a good evening.